It all started with needing help. Moses needed help. He didn't say he needed help. He didn't ask nicely for help. Instead, he had a meltdown, a big meltdown directed at God. Why have you treated me this way? I didn't birth all these people. I'm not able to carry them. Just let me die. I have had enough. I can tell you, Moses was not the last church leader to feel that way. More than one preacher, to say nothing of elders and deacons and music directors and Christian educators and mission workers, more than one has reached that breaking point. Moses knew what every church leader knows. There's always more to do, and you can't please everybody. No matter how hard you try, someone is always complaining. And sometimes you throw up your hands and say, why do I try? Or why do I bother? Or I just can't take it anymore. God's response, I always love it when people say the Old Testament God is a God of wrath, because there's all these wonderful stories of God not being like that. God's response is kind of amazing. God hears what Moses means to say instead of what Moses actually says. God hears Moses saying, I'm tired, I'm discouraged, I need help. And so God's response sets the stage for shared church leadership through the centuries and even to today. God tells Moses, gather 70 elders, bring them into the tent. So at this point in the story, the tent is the traveling sanctuary. Bring them to church. And God says, I'll take some of the Spirit that I put on you and I'll spread it around on them. That's what we do in ordination through this ancient ritual of prayer and laying on of hands. We open the way for God to take some of the Spirit that has been on us and on the generations of leaders that have gone before us and spread it around onto new leaders. Oh, but as much as we leaders want and need help, letting the Spirit loose makes us nervous. So does bringing in other people. What if they don't do it right? What if they don't do it the way we do it? What if they mess things up? Yes, we do get tired, we do get burned out, but when we do everything ourselves, at least we can make sure it's done right. Did you catch what happened in this story? Two of those elders, Eldad and Medad, they're remembered by name, they didn't come to the tent. They didn't show up at church for the ordination ceremony. They just went to work, doing what needed to be done. Oh, horrors. They skipped the ordination ceremony. They missed the orientation where we explain how everything is done. They didn't listen to the long-timers tell them the procedures and the preferences and explain that if you do this or that, then people will get mad. Or you can try that if you want, but we tried it and it didn't work before. They didn't listen. They went off and did things their own way. In our day, people like Eldad and Medad usually get the message. Those of us on the inside pull them aside and tell them, you're doing it wrong. That's not how we do it. And I know that that has happened to people in this room. And after people get told that, well, of course, they straighten up, don't they? Well, maybe. Sometimes they quit or they leave because it hurts their feelings. Well, in our story, Joshua, who is Moses' second in command, hurries to let Moses know that Eldad and Medad are doing it wrong, certain that Moses is going to stop them. Maybe Moses was really tired. Maybe he just didn't care anymore. Or maybe he caught the vision that God was offering about the Spirit being spread around and different people sharing the work, because Moses basically says, wow, that is great. I wish God's Spirit would take a hold of everyone and everyone would join in this ministry. Do you find yourself in these stories? Are you one who's been tired, burned out, wondering why you ever said yes? Or are you one who's been excited and inspired and ready to serve and then been told you're not doing it right? Are you, like me, you found how chaotic it can be when too many people are involved, too many cooks and all that, and then just step back and let a few people do it? Or maybe try to do it all yourself? It happens. But God does not mean for us to burn out. God does not mean for us to be overburdened or overwhelmed. And God has plenty of spirit to spread around so that the work can be shared. God is well pleased when we work within our orderly systems, and equally well pleased when people find new ways to do the Lord's work, even in ways that may scandalize those of us in the church establishment. Such an old story from the Torah, from our earliest Old Testament, and still so timely. I also had to read the story that I love from Acts, also a story about church leaders needing help. The early church was growing so fast and attracting such a diversity of people from different backgrounds, people with different needs. And besides preaching and teaching about Jesus, they were committed to caring for the poor and the needy, to providing food for the poor, specifically for widows. Now, you may know that in the ancient world, the poorest of the poor were widows. Because if you don't have a husband, you have no one to provide for you. A widow is by definition destitute and in need of the kind of charity that the church can give. But as the church was growing, there were so many people in need, so many widows, then as now, so many people in poverty. And the work of caring for them grew. It needed to be managed and organized, and people would get left out or forgotten. The apostles say, the church leaders, we have important work to do, preaching the word. We can't be bothered by serving tables. More than once, a preacher or an elder has spoken to the church deacons like that. It sounds terrible, really. What they mean to say is, we need help. We can't do everything ourselves. At least they didn't have a meltdown like Moses did. They seek help. They realize that the church will need more than preaching, and thank God for that. The church will need people who can really focus on caring for and tending those in need. So they seek help from faithful, spiritual people specifically called to lead the ministry of caring for the poor. And they name the first 7 deacons. Deacons who forever after will lead the church's ministries of care and service and helping those in need. And not only that, but if you caught it at the end of the story, by expanding the leadership from the apostles to include the deacons, the church was able to grow. You get it? When ministries are neglected because the handful of people who do everything are too worn out, when new blood is not sought out and welcomed in, when people with particular gifts are not called forward and empowered, then the church can't grow. Which brings us to that wonderful lesson so many of us know, and Ernie helped me talk about with the children. You may have heard that Paul was writing to the church at Corinth because they had problems. They were an argumentative sort. They'd gotten this idea, I'm sure you've never heard of it, they'd gotten this idea that some people in the church are more important than others. So some people held back and didn't offer much, and others thought that if it weren't for them, the church would collapse. But the church is like a body, Paul told them, like a human body. Sure, the head is important, but without a neck to hold it up or feet to carry it around, it's not very useful. And sure, being able to see is great, but it's not any better than being able to hear. The church needs everyone, he tells them. Otherwise, the body can't function at its best. It can't do the ministry of Jesus. If some parts of the body say, well, let's wait and see what the new minister is like, or if some parts of the body say, I'm old and tired and they don't need me anymore, or if some parts of the body say, some people just like to do everything, let them. And if some parts of the body act like a couple of arms can do everything, without feet or ears or knees or backbone, then everything will be out of whack. It's an old lesson, but it's still so timely. Today, we celebrate all those who have volunteered their time and service in our common life over the past year, even as we ordain and install those who are stepping into new roles for the coming season in our church's life. And we ask ourselves, each and every one of us, we ask ourselves, what part am I playing in the body? Where is the Spirit calling me to serve? Here in this building or out there in the wider world? If it's been a while since you've been involved, or if you've never been sure if or where there's a place for you, I invite you to step up. And if you're one who does a lot, I invite you to open your ears and your eyes and your heart to those around us who might be saying, I have an idea. Or what if we tried it like this? For the body, this body, Christ Church, does not consist of one member but many. A few people can work themselves into a frenzy doing lots of tasks, but only the whole body together can do ministry. Ministry, God's work of sharing good news with a hurting world. So dig deep, my friends, ears and eyes, heads and shoulders, big toes and little fingers. Dig deep and listen to how God's Spirit is touching you and inviting you to say, here I am, send me. Amen.